We begin with the Line 5 pipeline dispute. Canada has now formally asked to negotiate with the U.S. to keep Michigan from shutting the project down. Line 5 itself runs underwater between Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. It carries 540,000 barrels of oil and gas per day. Ontario and Quebec get more than half their crude supply from that pipeline, but Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer says it's a ticking time bomb that puts the health of the Great Lakes in jeopardy. Ontario has warned thousands of jobs are at risk if Michigan gets its way and could create a fuel and propane shortage leading to skyrocketing prices. So enter now the federal government. Kirsten Hillman is Canada's ambassador to the United States, and she is in Washington, D.C. Ambassador Hillman, thanks very much for joining the program.
Thanks for having me.
So the Biden administration said earlier this year that the White House didn't want to touch this, didn't want to get involved, and now you're essentially forcing the administration to get involved. What does it say about the process to this point that we have to invoke a 40-plus-year-old treaty?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is that, the U.S. government, like the Canadian government, has been hoping and has been encouraging Enbridge and the state of Michigan to try to resolve this issue between themselves. It is a dispute between Michigan and Enbridge, and we really were working hard to support them in doing that, as was the U.S. government. They had mediation, court-ordered mediation, and we were having discussions with the U.S. government. Unfortunately, neither of those processes have led to a solution to date. Mm-hmm. And so we don't take this lightly, but we have to use all the tools in our toolbox to try to ensure that this essential piece of infrastructure continues to operate.
What if the White House says no and just sends it back to the courts?
Well, so the way the treaty is set out, the first thing that we do is we seek a negotiation under the treaty. And this is a legal binding treaty between our two countries. And so I have every expectation that the U.S. State Department will sit down with our Global Affairs Department officials and discuss this treaty and negotiate it.
Governor Whitmer and the president are quite close. And Governor Whitmer has made this a signature part of her agenda, is to stop Line 5. She campaigned on it. She has, through much of her administration, talked about it. She's urged Enbridge to take action sooner. Why should we believe now that the Biden administration would go against what they have said previously, would not take a very hard line in the negotiations?
Well, I think that, as I said, we have been in discussions with the U.S. administration for over 8 months, mm-hmm. quietly, behind the scenes, trying to see if we can support the parties in coming to a solution. And Enbridge has has put some ideas on the table to try and address some of the governor's concern. They are working hard to advance the tunnel project, which is a project that will make this safe pipeline even safer. There are a lot of ideas.
Although Governor Whitmer has also said she doesn't want that either. She wants this 64-year-old pipeline not just shut down, but there to be no successor.
Well, Governor Whitmer has at times said that she doesn't oppose necessarily the building of the tunnel, which was started under her predecessor. So I think that what's important here is that we have a robust conversation to really see if there are avenues to resolve the problem, because just keeping it in the courts for however long that takes isn't going to be a solution either in the long term to making sure that this energy gets back into Canada from Western Canada.
The political rhetoric here is very strong. Just minutes before we started speaking to you, Governor Whitmer released a statement. In it she says, quote, "Rather than taking steps to diversify energy supply and ensure resilience, Canada has channeled its efforts into defending an oil company with an abysmal environmental track record." And she goes on to cite the 2010 Kalamazoo River oil spill as one of the largest inland oil spills in the history of the U.S. When you see that kind of really strong rhetoric at the end of 8 months of court-ordered negotiations that have yielded nothing, 8 months of lobbying that have led us to the position that we're in right now, 8 months of that diplomacy. What does it say when you hear that level of rhetoric?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is I don't think that level of rhetoric is going to be constructive in finding a solution. I think that ultimately what we need to do is to find ways to ensure that the protection of the Great Lakes, which of course is as important to Canada as it is to Michigan, is safeguarded, while we also ensure that this vital piece of infrastructure for both our energy and our economic security is maintained. And I think that the governor understands that. She is expressing frustration, perhaps, in a way that is stronger than I think is likely maybe going to be useful in getting to a solution, and that's her choice. But hopefully we'll be able to keep the temperature down and have these conversations in a professional way with the U.S. federal government, and we will be able, through those discussions, to find ways to encourage Michigan and the company to come back to the table with some pragmatic solutions.
What's the timeline here? I mean, there's the latest chapter in what will be a multi-year process?
Well, for this treaty process specifically, we have the next step is to start these negotiations. And so I suspect in the coming days, maybe weeks, we will reach out to probably days, we will reach out to the U.S. State Department and seek to set up some preliminary meetings and get those discussions going. How long they will take, it's hard for me to say at this point. Hopefully it won't take too long. Hopefully it will lead to success quickly.
I would be remiss if I let you go without talking about the two Michaels released a couple of weeks ago now, and I'm not even quite that. But you were at the White House last week, along with Canada's ambassador to China, Ambassador Barton, and I'm not going to be so silly as to ask you what you talked about there, because I'm sure you're not going to tell me. But maybe you could illuminate us a little bit on what this says about the relationship, particularly with the Biden administration, that I know the Biden administration is saying there was no deal. It just so happened that the two Michaels were flying out of China at the same time that Ms. Meng was flying out of Canada. I know they're saying that was just basically pure coincidence, but maybe you can illuminate us a bit on what it says about the relationship of our two countries, Canada and the United States.
Sure. I think that the first thing I would say is I don't think anyone's saying it's pure coincidence. That was a highly coordinated day. And obviously, everybody knows that could not have happened that way by pure coincidence. So what people are saying is, and which is true, is that the release of the Michaels was not conditional on any of the negotiation of the DPA for Madam Meng. So just to be clear on that. Okay. I do think that, Canada is grappling with our relationship with this complicated country that is China, and the ways in which we want to interact with them in protecting the environment commercially, on the human rights fronts. It's a multifaceted and complicated relationship, and the U.S. is doing the same. And the U.S. is our biggest and most important partner and ally. And so it is natural that while we work with allies to grapple with how we're going to move forward with China, we want to be sure that we're in discussions with them, because there will be many ways in which we may want to do things together, or we may want to, approach things in the same manner as many of our allies, including, of course, the United States.
Ambassador Hillman, as always, it's fantastic to have you on the program. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks, David. Take care.
You too.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.